I'm sure I must have met you at one of the buskers, or in Manchester when I was there.
I probably bumped into you, but my clearest last memory of meeting you was that gig in 1987 in Chsterfiled, supported by the local band that did a fanzine, which had a really weird name that I can't remember. And Russell Senior came down to the gig and gave me a pulp demo. I remember that as well.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. No, I was good friends with Russell at the time, and it was great because I got to do a few gigs with Pulp, and I used to know all the Sheffield bands. So although I can't, I have no musical ability whatsoever. I can't sing. I have actually sang in front of 3.4 million viewers on Packet of Three, and I played the kazoo. But I know for a fact that I can't. I once tried to sing one of Johnny Dangerously's songs, with this idea that I might be able to make a few bob at some point. And he was just couldn't stop laughing. He just couldn't stop laughing at how bad I was. But I do love the old rock and roll thing, and it's sort of been given lots of names, isn't it? I don't know what the current sort of name is, but anything that's not too mainstream, I've always been fond of.
I suppose indie now, but it was alternative once, wasn't it? That's what we used to call it, which was actually a better term, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And so we tried to do a bit. Chsterfield's quite a weird thing. It was a stopping stone for me for Chsterfield, and sort of almost a John the Baptist to Manchester's Jesus, because I came from Nottingham and I lived in Chsterfield for a while, and I gave up being an insurance broker there, and I met some people in a pub once, and I was just sat there, and I were in my insurance suit and everything, and drinking, and they were all from the arts college. They were there. They did a foundation course, and there was 3 members of the Bland. I don't know if you remember the band called.
That's who supported us that night in Chesterfield.
Oh, that was Well, they were great. So they were there. Thrash. I think they were thrash pop. I think they'd call themselves.
Yeah. They're quite good, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Without any prejudice whatsoever, I was just sat there talking, and we got talking, and within a couple of weeks, we'd become friends, and I lived with a couple of them in a flat. We shared a flat, and I got involved with all the art scene and the music scene in Chesterfield, and set up would you believe a record shop with Dids from the Bland, called Planet X Records. Now, I know nothing about running a record shop. It's just when I gave up being an insurance broker, I had a bit of money from my pension. I cashed my pension in in my 20s, and so I set up this record shop, and then we'd get involved with, as you say, doing bands, and Dids and Rat and Pat, 3 characters that were there in Chesterfield, ran a place called Gotham City. And I used to do the door for them, and because I was more official looking. If we needed to talk to management, I'd sort of hang around and talk to management.
Yeah, I remember you had a big black coat on, like a Crombie.
That's right.
Like
yes.
a little black quiff at the time. Sort of
Yeah. Well, I was in a transition from being the insurance broker to being an artisan, of poetry. But they're great times, and it was a great introduction to what I'd call community arts, because I think a lot of what I've been involved with has been, sort of this thing of enjoying the community of other artists. So there was lots of, there was photographers and potters and painters and all sorts of things. And then when I came to Manchester, of course, you had this great scene in Manchester where it was you never really get somebody on the bill that was exactly the same as you. There'd be, you know, Steve Coogan doing sort of funny voices and impressions and everything. And then you got, you know, his brother, Martin, doing an acoustic set. You know, and then you got, you know, you may be on. I was Stockport Town Hall. I was on with can dancers.
Yeah, old school music hall showbiz. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And you know, but Chris Cooper he put a poet on, and then he put you know, a singer songwriter on, and a comedian. So you got, you know, Bob Dillinger doing his jokes to a guitar, and to me it was such an adventure, because I don't know whether you know, but when I was in Nottingham and I was a young man in my 20s, in my early 20s, there were no scene at all. You know, I mean, I think Nottingham now is really changed, and there's a great scene. But at the time, maybe I didn't find it, but I couldn't find anywhere other than the local bookshop and the library. And to go around sort of my council estate in Nottingham, and try to think of yourself as being a poet. You know, I got a centre party at the time, ringlets. And I'd wear like purple and black flares. This is in my early 20s, and I'd walk past skinheads.
Yeah.
And they're always quite young skinheads at the time. I think partly they'd shave it to get rid of the nits. So you'd have skinheads, and then they'd always hang out outside the chip shop. And then the other side of the road would be the Pelican pub in Bilborough, where I was brought up. And they'd be the Grebos. I don't know, did you call them Grebos?
Yeah, we did actually, and it's weird because it became a musical term about 10 years later, like it was a wholly original term. But
Yeah.
we use it in the north, haven't we? That's what you call people on motorbikes, bikers.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any much glamorous about them. They're quite, they're quite just lazy, dirty sort of. I mean, my brother was one, so you know, I can say this with fondness. But they basically couldn't be arsed. I quite like that about them. But what I used to find is I'd walk down the middle of them, and they'd be the skinheads this side, and there'd be the Grebos outside, sat outside the pub, and they'd look at me, and they just wouldn't bother me. And one skinhead once said to me, he said, "You're not worth hitting." I thought, what a lovely state I've arrived at. I'm of no threat to anybody, so I'm not. And then occasionally they'd have a rumpus between them, and then because very often they were younger and older brothers from the same family, they'd have a rumpus, then walk home.
Yeah, shake hands. Yeah.
So it's a very strange introduction, but I say for me, there were no. I didn't know any other poets or anybody trying to do anything creative. And then I joined a library, and I met some people doing short stories and novels and writing plays and everything. And it was all very literary because it was in a library and everything. So I say there's nobody doing anything what you might call entertainment as such. So really the transition was through Chsterfiled and then to Manchester. And of course I arrived at Manchester at exactly the right time.
I mean, so it was when you're still in Chsterfiled, was it, when somebody introduced you to the ranting poets like Swells, Attila the Stockbroker, your southern version in a sense? You were like a northern insurance agent, and he's like Attila the Stockbroker.
I know I'm a softer version, John. I realise that because I like to be friendly. And I saw Swells for the first time. I saw him in Manchester, strangely enough. So I had a girlfriend in Manchester, and I came up to Manchester, and I saw him at the, I think it would be the Nelson Mandela building at the time, if you remember that, along the university. And he got on the stage. And I'd never seen him before. I'd read some of his stuff in Attack of the Bazag, which is a zine. And he got on the stage, and he said, "This is not right. This is not right." And he got off the stage, and he got the entire audience on the stage. And then he did his set from off the stage to them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I love that. I love that. He had such an intensity to him that you didn't mess. If he said get on the stage, you got on the stage. I actually think that he is very undervalued for his contribution to poetry. I would say, looking back and looking at all the others, and you know, Attila and all the rant poets at the time, and Little Brother and all those, you know, they all were part of something, and Jules Denby and all these were part of. But for me, the actual creative difference was sort of epitomized by Swells, because his imagery was all about working class imagery, warts and all, and his delivery and the way that he, in his attitude, was very fresh. I don't think you could find, if you look at one of his poems, I don't think you could find the roots of those poems anywhere else. I think it was a leap. He was a leap forward there. Now, and it informed me. And obviously, as I say, I'm sort of a softer version, but there are times when I think the power of what he was doing is you've got to find your way of enhancing that. And I would love to. I would love to see him acknowledged as somebody that moved things forward for a lot of people, and move things forward as an art form. In the same way, if you go back to the 60s and you look at the Liverpool poets, I think people now generally realise that the shift, and I include Adrian Mitchell in the Liverpool poets. I always think of him as one of them. That shift into we're going to entertain and do poetry, and we're going to try and give you a blend of the two. Was a big leap forward, but I think, and I think we acknowledge that now, but we don't. I think perhaps because he died young, we've not really give Stephen Wells or Susan Wells, as he went out as sometimes, the respect he deserves.
What about Cooper Clarke? What does he fit into this? Was he just slightly before the times, or was he? To me, he was very key. Yeah. Yeah,
well, he's very key, and I mean, there's apart from Beasley Street, there's no real social comment in John Cooper Clarke, and I like what he's doing. I mean, traditionally he does an ABAB form of poetry, and or as he would say, they're all the same tune. I made it easy for you. So you know, I like his stuff, and as a performer and as an image, I remember going to, it was the Lead Mill where I saw him. So I saw him and he was playing to about 200 people at the Lead Mill, and it was such a different event from any other poetry that I'd seen at the time. I saw him before Swells, and it was, I mean, there was a certain glamour to it in that rock and roll sense, and there's an energy to it, and you felt that you were at the start of something, in the same way as, you know, music can give you that sort of opening you up to an whole new world. And so I love him for that, and I think you know, he stayed true to himself. He's not tried to write too many poems. He's just on his second book. So you know, I think he's a definite article, and there's definitely a link in the chain of moving the art form forward. I think we acknowledge that. I think with Stephen Wells, it's the fact that he's been airbrushed out. That's what annoys me, and I'm taking a bit of his, you know, his own annoyance, and it's channeling through me, because you know, I would like to see him. You know, if ever you hear of any tribute to him, or any way of getting him to the public consciousness, what I did do is I filmed him. I filmed when I was at Baby Cow and I was working as a television executive. I filmed, I think I've got 6 of his poems delivered perfectly on location. For an urban poet, strangely enough, we filmed him in the middle of a cornfield.
Yeah.
I've no idea why. Just
maybe trying to say he was corny without telling him.
No.
I'm joking. Well, surely that could be a film. I mean, that would be a great film. You could build that a lot of things around that and make the definitive story of this great.
Well, if somebody made a film, I'd make sure that they could use that. Obviously, I think his poems are about 3 minutes long, so you've got 6, so you've got about 18 minutes there. But it'd be great to build something around that.
There's definitely a story to be told there. Yeah.
Oh, there's definitely a story to be told.
I might come back to you about that at some point. So, this scene was called like the Ranting Poets, wasn't it? And were you part of that scene? Did you perform with a lot of these people?
Well, because I was performing with bands, I would say, and I had an album out at the time, which did very well in Portugal, apparently. I used to say where it fit the electric meters perfectly. And it was called The Ostrich Man. And if you listen to it, you can see that the stuff that I was doing at the time was more, because I was youthful. It was more about love and sex and, courting, as I would say in the old-fashioned way. It was about pop culture. So I used to do stuff about goths and, sort of the various, Smiths fans and stuff like that. So it had a feel to it that it was around the same area, but I can't say that I was particularly good at political comment, and I can't say that I ranted because, to be perfectly frank, I ain't got the memory to rant. I have to read it off a bit of paper. I'm sort of slightly autistic. I don't know whether you know this, John, but I have an autistic son, and I realised that my brain works in a certain way, and one of them is that I can't remember anything for a great length of time. So I could never be a stand-up comedian and not have the poems. The poems are very good for me to own in and focus on. But
it's interesting you mentioned the autism in your son, because ostensibly what we're talking about here today is your new poetry collection, new poetry show, and that's part of what it's about, isn't it? About dealing with your son's autism, and in a sense, what I always think with this autism, it's actually now looked on as it's not easy to be in that situation, but it's a superpower of its own, really, isn't it?
Well, it is, and all of us, all our brains work differently, don't they? We have to come to terms with the way each of us works. My son is an exaggerated form in that he won't be able to hold a conversation with you. He talks in one-word sentences and has no real interest in any sociability. So he's quite severe on this thing. But I've met over the years many people who are sort of a little bit on the spectrum. I mean, my dad was, but of course, in my dad's day, you just say you get an allotment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or get a shed or something.
And
I say I have my traits. I can see a lot of people that enjoy maths or sort of Sudoku or jigsaw puzzles, all this about putting things in order. That's very much an autistic trait, and there's a lot of people like that. A lot of geeks and nerds. These are all names that we've found for sort of trying to sort of express something about a person when they're, I always say it's quite a funny thing, when you see Glastonbury and you see all these people jumping up and down in the middle of Glastonbury. I could never do that, and what I found is that anybody that examines the world and steps back, and I think most creative people do, they sort of step back and examine the world. They become too self-conscious to have that thing where you can stand in the middle of a crowd and enjoy the moment and not wonder what it's all about. And I've met many people through all the television stuff that I've done, and all the poetry stuff that I've done over the years.
Well, it does make you wonder. Was the underground music scene of the 80s a place for all these people? We used to say it's for a place for all the misfits and the people who didn't fit in anywhere. But in a sense, not everybody, but was quite a driving force of people who were manifesting this, both through the arts, really, because it actually was a superpower for the arts, wasn't it? So the bands, musicians, even the audience collecting records, all these kind of traits are there, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the arts and it is just one of these ways that we try to understand the world. And I think you're right. I think we were all drawn together in Manchester in the 80s, not wanting. And of course, the 80s was quite a bleak time for a lot of people because of Thatcherism. I remember I used to walk through the Arndale Centre. And with all the majesty and glory of the Arndale Centre, I used to walk through it. And if I could walk through and not spend any money, I used to love that. Just the idea that I'm not, I'm
not seduced.
Yeah, bamboozled by the bright lights and everything. I think there is maybe a deeper truth that people creatively are looking for. You'll see my son paints. These are all my son's paintings. And although he can't talk, he paints every day.
I mean, there's an explosive energy to those paintings. If you can make them into music, like Kandinsky was painting to free jazz. So if you went backwards from those paintings into music, I would definitely listen to that music.
Yeah, well, he does. So he does sometimes dance as he's painting, because he enjoys it so much. Now, if I put all these on the fire, it wouldn't matter to him. He's painting another one tomorrow. Do you know? It's the act of doing it that he likes, and it's taught me a great lesson because since I retired from television, I've written about 600 poems, and it's just the act of
the physicality of writing.
Yeah, and it is, and it's a sort of a conversation with yourself as well. So it's one of the better conversations you're going to get of a day. So I quite like that, and quite exploring, sort of what it is I'm thinking and what it is I should be thinking. And so I can spend a good hour thinking up a daft poem. Whereas other people might, play football or something like that, that's an hour well spent for me.
So this collection of poems is about, yes, it's dealing with that, the physicality of writing, but also come to terms of trying to understand maybe your son as well, because some of the poems are about your son as well, aren't they? And understanding his autism, understanding your autism as well, understanding you and his place in the world. Is that the crux of what you're doing here?
That is, and I'm touring in the autumn. I'm coming up. I'm doing several gigs around Manchester, and really, that's in it, but it's an overall sort of view of life thing. And I think the thing is, if you just narrow it down to one thing, it can become very difficult. Whereas what I try to do, and I'm sure most bands do this, and I'm sure most, is you try to vary the pace of things. You try to give light and shade. You try to build a package so that you can say the most difficult things, but over a course of an hour and a half, 2 hours in a show, you entertain enough that you leave having got those sort of insights and moments, but the overall feeling is uplifting. And I think if you just write about and just perform the most difficult stuff, you'd be getting the book and using the pages to slit your wrists. So whilst some people can discount, sort of the lighter moments, I think you need them. And I think, working in comedy and television over the years, I realized that you can only move people so many times within an hour.
Well, isn't that one of the great, very British, but one of the great traits of comedy is pathos, and be able to deal with really heavy subject matter and make people laugh at the same time.
It is, and you've sort of got to earn it in a way. So what I tend to think of is the common thread, and I think it's a common thread on a lot of creativity. It's truth, isn't it? We're looking for truth, and you can spot it straight away. You can spot authenticity, and if you tell jokes that people with truth, and then you give them a poem or a bit of writing that has got a different angle on truth, then you'll accept it, and you'll accept them both and enjoy them both for what they are. So it's finding your way of delivering that. So subject matter wise, I would like to think throughout all the stuff that I do, whether it be about being a parent, or whether it about being the way your brain works, or whether it be sort of some daft observation, it's really about you experiencing a similar thing, so that at any point in time you can empathize and say, well, those exact things didn't happen, but I understand the general principle. I think there's a famous saying that poetry is better than history, because history is about the particular, whereas poetry is about the general.
The feeling, not the facts, which is interesting, because isn't that very unautistic? Is that like
no, it might be.
Yeah, you're mentioning words like empathy, feeling, and which obviously autistic people do, of course, as you know, have those feelings as well. But they're not the forefront of decisions.
You've got to think about Spock in Star Trek. It's not that Spock didn't have feelings; he just couldn't control them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's the same way with a lot of us. Most of us, it is an autistic trait, but I think it's true of most of us, that we have thoughts and feelings that we don't quite understand, and we have a lot of them going on at the same time, so they get a bit muddled. And I think one of the great things you can do with creativity is, whether it be painting, whether it be music, whether it be poetry, is you can get it outside yourself, and you can look at it and see the edges of it, and see, whether it was something to be afraid of, or whether you can understand it better like that. So one of the things I do love about poetry is, I'll write something, I'm not quite sure where it's going to end, and then I'll get to it and I'll go, oh, that's what I was thinking about. And because it's there, I can see it, and in a funny way, because it's outside yourself, it's not as muddled, but also it can't. Do you know what I mean? And you've contained it. So I think if there's a reason why we're creative, I think it must be this coming to terms with emotions.
It's a very logical way of looking at it.
Yeah, I remember when I first listened to music. I'm sure you do, and when I think back, what it evoked in me was emotions. I was a big fan of sort of early Zeppelin when I was about sort of 16, and when I heard When the Levee Breaks. Now, I don't know. Yeah, I could probably tell you the words to it, but the words to it didn't matter that much. The beat of it and the loudness, and I used to put it on before I went to school, so I'd play it as loud as I could, and then I'd go to school, and there was something emotional about it that I couldn't explain, but it just suited me right at that time. And I'm sure when people say to you, they say, what's your favourite record? And you can't say, because you've got, it depends what mood you're in. So it depends
changes
on the emotion
every
of the
second.
moment.
Yeah. And it's powerful, isn't it? To me, I mean, personally, it's the most powerful art form. It's incredibly emotional music and affects in so many different ways. I mean, would that be true for you, or do you find the actual spoken word more powerful, or the paintings of your son as powerful? Can you go to different art forms to find the same emotional impact?
Do you know, I think all the art forms have got something, and I think each of us has got to find it. I love Johnny's paintings are all over the house. This is the most colourful house you'll ever see, because we just hung his paintings in every room, and I love that. And I live in colour. Do you know what I mean? And we were looking for another house recently, and we're looking at these houses. And of course, when people sell houses, all the walls are white. Have you noticed this? Right, and they take all the family photos down, and all you see is like really tidy houses with white walls.
Scary, yeah.
Yes, guys, great. Like nobody's bought art in these houses ever, right? And I'm looking at them thinking, oh my God, we sell our house, there's somebody's in for a shock. I mean, but it's so I live also. Music over the years, it's changed my life. I stopped being an insurance broker because of the specials and because of the film Animal House. I got this thing back in the day when having been brought up on a council estate, the idea that you had a license to enjoy yourself and do something other than work in a factory. My dad worked at Raleigh and my brother worked at Raleigh. And the chances are I was going to work at Raleigh. What I did was I worked in an office, and I bought myself I got a flat, and I bought myself some furniture, and I got like me knives in the knife bit, and me forks in the fork bit, and me cups and saucers and everything. So I was like a little old man, all set for life at the age of 20, right? Yeah. Got it all sorted, all ready. And then Too Much Too Young came on the turntable. And I thought, yeah, what have I done? There's no adventure to this. I'm sort of set. I was a manager of an insurance broker in Hull, of all places. And then I went to see the film Animal House. I don't know whether you've seen that film with Belushi. And there were people having fun. I thought, they're older than me. What am I doing? so I went into the office next day and handed me notice in. And I thought, well, I'll try and have an adventure. I'll go and do something. So I'd written poetry since about the age of 14. My mum died when I was 11, and there's 5 kids in the family. So I sort of became a bit more reclusive after that. I was quite gregarious before that. And then from 11, I read a lot of books and poetry books, but mainly comedy books, the Monty Python stuff and the Goons and all that sort of stuff. But I came across a book called Small Dreams of a Scorpion by Milligan. And I thought, there's something about the fact that he was so funny, and yet this book was making me cry, that I loved it to bits. And so I thought, that's the way I want to go. So, I had this.
He's an interesting person to mention. I mean, he's not very PC, is he? So he's kind of been written out of history now, but he was really important in all this world. You can see his influence all the way from the Beatles right through to quite a lot of punk as well, and that idea that because he did have a breakdown after the war, you can feel it in his writing, and his humor is actually tragic and quite heartbreaking, but also incredibly thrilling and surrealistic and exciting, isn't it?
It is, and unpredictable. The great thing about comedy is you want it to be unpredictable. If you know what's coming, it's not funny. And he was brilliant at going left field. And I met him once. It was quite strange. So I was running Baby Cow, sort of comedy production company at the time, and I was asked to be on a judging panel with him. So this was down in Brighton, and I'd done a full day's work, and I went down to Brighton on the train. So I'm another hour there, and I get there, so I'm a bit knackered, and I'm sat next to him. And so I said to him, you know, I love your poetry, and so he starts reciting his poetry to me. Now he's getting on a bit at this point, and I thought it's all right, but I don't want to be reciting. I mean, I know his poetry. I don't want to be reciting. I wanted to try and talk to him as a human being. You know, it's like when, you know, some people are on all the time, aren't they?
Yeah.
And anyway, people kept coming up to us and asking for his autograph, and he kept telling them to fuck off, and they'd laugh, right, thinking that he was joking, but he was just telling them to fuck off, basically. And so I sort of I took a deep breath, and I thought I'll try and start a conversation that's, you know, like a conversation between two blokes. So I said to him, I said, you live at Rye, I think it is, that he used to live. And I said, I live in Brighton because I just love being by the, you know, I'm from Nottingham. I love being by the sea. I find it very peaceful. And he leant forward and he said, Henry, you're a fascinating man. And I sort of went, oh God. So I told my wife that story, and if ever I'm a little bit boring, she said, Henry, you're a fascinating man.
Good name for a book.
Yeah.
Do you wonder if he was actually a bit on the spectrum? He seemed sort of detached from normal humanity, didn't he? Which was part of his genius, wasn't it?
It's part of his genius. His brain obviously was able to access. I mean, all our brains have got all these tie-ins, haven't they? And when you mention a word, say you mention orange, the word orange, you'll go through those tie-ins to all the different connotations you have come across in your life of the word orange. And his tie-ins were a lot different to you know, what you might call a neurotypical, and so he was able to put things together in different ways and surprise you. I think that's there's a sort of a few changes in comedy that I've noticed over the years. Obviously, the Monty Python and Spike Milligan was a big change, where before that things were quite predictable in that what you were dealing with was consequence. So a lot of the stories were about something happens and here's the consequence. And I read Freud's jokes in their relation to the unconscious, and he talks about this idea that what makes you laugh very often is that a joke will make you aware of unforeseen consequences. So if you think about the old Tommy Cooper joke, a man walks into a bar and says, ouch, it was an iron bar, right? Obviously, you know, we've heard it and it's an old joke. It's not so funny now, but when he was telling...
No, it's still really funny.
It's still all right, yeah. But when he was telling it, you know, it's a classic, as Freud would say, reveal, in that you're given an image in your head that a man walks into a bar, and then you're given this incongruous statement of, he says, ouch, and then you're wondering what it's about, and then it's revealed that what the image that you had in your head is not the image that you're supposed to have. You know, it was an iron bar, and then you laugh at the fact that you're imperfect, that you've got it wrong, and I think there's something quite beautiful about the fact that a lot of comedy is based on you empathizing and laughing with human imperfection. And I think there's something in poetry, and there's something in a lot of the creative arts that is about that. It's about the human imperfection. So I've always thought that comedy sort of sits well with the other art forms, but it is belittled. You know, you don't get many films, comedy films, winning the best film award, do you?
Mm. It's interesting. Yeah, we talk about this in the depths of comedy and the art of comedy, because I did an interview with Stewart about 3 years ago, and he's a very, and I don't know why, but I just thought he ad-libbed his live performance, which I think is fantastic. He is brilliant.
Yeah.
But it's all really meticulously worked out. And he's a very big student of comedy going back to the 1920s, collects old musical scripts. Will that be the same with you? Are you a student of comedy, or did you just find you have this knack of making people laugh and you honed it down?
Well, I did have a knack when I was little to make people laugh, but it became an enthusiast. And funnily enough, I was at Stuart Lee's first outside London gig when he was a very young man, probably in his teens, and he was brilliant then. You know, has really worked at it and owned it. I think I was turned on to comedy when I watched telly. I used to watch the Bilko you know, all that sort of stuff, and I loved that. And I'd stop up late in the Marx Brothers and stuff. And then the one that really captured it for me is I saw Jack Benny on the Dean Martin show.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know whether you know much about Jack Benny. He's one of these people that he's probably, you need to be a generation older to have caught him. But he was the biggest comedian in the world at one point. And it was on the Dean Martin show. And so you've got to think, I'm one of 5 kids, no mum. I'm sort of 12 years old. I've got no arse in my trousers, no prospects. And I'm sat watching me telly, which has got 3 channels. And late at night, and there's Dean Martin, and he's in tuxedo, and he's on the phone. And Jack Benny comes in, and Jack Benny is a very genial sort of bloke, and he comes in, and he's in a tuxedo, and they nod to each other, and because he's on the phone, Jack Benny goes, you know, to sort of into the living room bit, but he don't sit on the sofa as every adult that I've ever come across would do. He gets on the floor and he starts in his tuxedo and he starts throwing dice. And I remember thinking at the time, that's the world I want to live in. It just looks, it's so glamorous and yet so anarchic and so sort of, you know, adults doing things that you wouldn't know. And so I found all the Jack Benny that I could watch, and there's some great stuff. To Be or Not to Be, the original version of it with Jack Benny, is sublime. It's a sublime film, and you know, I sort of read a lot. When I was at doing A levels, I used to skive off a lot, and I'd write comedy sketches, and I'd put them on the notice board upside down. And the heading was always, please do not read. And I did this and put them upside down for people to stand there like that and read them. And so I got this desire right back sort of from my teens to experiment and to do something.
Mm.
And
so would you say
it was a great way to do that.
So would you say the lines between comedy and poetry for you personally are quite blurred, really? They're the same kind of disciplines, or would you say they're very different?
I think it's all about communication, and we just find different ways of communicating. So, you know, I've written TV scripts, and I've written, you know, a proper book, as it were. But poetry is a great, like a song, is a great form of communication because it's quite composite. And therefore the words have to do quite a lot. And it's, you know, some of the things that we have to say and some of the things that we think about don't need more than 1 page. You know, why do they? Yeah, some things are, you know, the truth of them is stark enough that you can get it on 1 page. There's a weird thing that happens with poetry that annoys me, that if we were talking about music, I'm sure you could probably name 60 different types of music. And within those 60 different types, there'll be artists, and you can say, well, there's these 10 artists that exemplify this type of music, but they're all different. And then even within each artist, you'd say, well, they've had about 20 albums, and not all the albums are good. Some albums are good, some albums are not good. And then even within the album, you'd say, yeah, well, I like that track, but not so keen on that track. And we have this way of thinking about a music, that we don't think that just because you hear one song, that's the same as understanding, what the musician or the singer is about. Whereas with poetry, very often it's thought of as being one lump. And people would say to me in interviews, is poetry dead? Or, is poetry the new rock and roll? As though it's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say every poem is a different thing, in the same way as every musical song is a different, has a different sort of world about it. So one of the things I'd like to do is to maybe get to the people who don't think poetry is for them, because they've read one thing at school, and if that's what the blob is, then they don't want it.
They don't like poetry, but they'll sing song lyrics. I mean, I always think that's quite interesting, because they are surely pop songs are just populist poems set to music.
They are, and there's some great lyrics, aren't they? And there's some lyrics that stay with you for years. They can help you along, and there's, even the simplest thing. So one of the songs I sing with my son is Bob Marley's "Don't Worry About a Thing." Very simple lyrics, but and a very simple tune. But sometimes we don't need to be too complicated.
It's actually harder, to strip everything down to something so simple. Whereas people expecting the Mona Lisa, but you can draw a stick man, which has equal amount of power. It's a skill, isn't it?
It is a skill, and to only put in the essential, and that thing of finding the universal in the particular. We've all heard songs where it's somebody else's name in it, but we actually become the person, don't we, in the song? So I do love poetry, and there's some great poets around. Obviously Lem Sissay from Manchester is one of my favourites, and still a good mate of mine over the years. And I saw him, and I was enthused with him in the same way as I was talking about Stephen Wells, because he was an evangelist, and still is, for getting out there and reaching the parts that other poets don't reach, as Carlsberg would say.
Yeah, taking it to the people, it's a people's form anyway. It's just giving it back to them, isn't it?
It is. I don't know what happened somewhere between the end of the war and the 60s. Somewhere it became old men in suits muttering to themselves. I don't know why.
That's us, isn't it? Right now. So your show, it's not just you doing poems, is it? There's an attempt to take this to people, and it's got a structure to it, and an interesting structure.
Oh yeah. Well, all the shows that I do there's an element of a story to them. You want to deliver a larger message than the individual parts. This one, the escape plan. Is the reason he called the escape plan is that my brother died of cancer about 4 years ago, and before he died, he was laid there with myself and my 3 sisters with him, and his wife, and he'd got his eyes closed, and my younger sister said to him, because he's like the older brother, he said, what are you thinking about, Dave? And I think he wanted to make it easy for us, you know, to keep our spirits up. And he just said, I'm hatching a plan. And I love that. I love that. That even, you know, at the point of, you know, he'd be dead within a day, he's still got this escape plan route.
The Great Escape. Yeah, brilliant.
And so, you know, part of the show is finding that in us, that, you know, that what it is, that's the essence of us. So there's humor in that, and pathos, and a sense of self, that, you know, and a sense of community. Yeah, there's I should have done this show about, well, a year ago. Obviously, then COVID came. I was really looking forward to it. I've been doing some BBC Radio 4 shows. I don't know whether you've caught any of them. And what I do with each of those shows are half hour long, but I've been on the tours I've been doing over the past 4 or 5 years. I've been sort of working them through. And what I do is I pick a subject. So the last one was about, there was one about the universe, and then the last one was about communication. And I research them. So I go on Wikipedia and find all the terms of references, and then go and look at all the different aspects of it, and ask as many questions as I can, and then try and condense a little message about that. So I've done 9 of these so far. So this latest tour is again, it's one of these ways of finding a world, investigating it all, and trying to come over with a little bit of message. I'm not going to nail it for you, because I want people to come and see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't point me telling you and everybody staying at home.
But each night will have a different theme. Is that what it's going to be? And
I think it'll progress over the time. But obviously, I have from day one. I have a theme. I did a show in the Lowry. That was the first. That was the starter show of the tour, and I managed to do that before we were cut short.
And you have guests there with you as well. I think.
No, it's just
you on your own. Yeah.